Welcome back to the Rules of Engagement. We're about to jump into Sase vs. Snute, of course. We just talked a little bit about a couple of the Rain vs. Flying games. Rain did go on to win it, series 3-2. But we're about to jump into Sase vs. Snute. Before we do that, let me remind you guys, if you thought any of what you saw in that last promo was pretty cool, some cool graphic design, if you're interested in doing that as a career for yourself in the future, either as a part of a video game production team for any of the multiple video producers out there in the world, or even if you want to work in the esports angle, making graphics for us, like the ones used in my show, like the ones used in our major events, etc. Please go ahead and check out www.fullsail.edu/MLG. Tell them what different programs or what different aspects of game design you're interested in. They'll email you some information about this potential career path for you guys. For example, if, maybe you can make a little mod where if you zoom in on your Zerg units, your Hydras look like this guy over here. A lot more ferocious than the game ones. Don't want to pet that guy. It's pretty spiny. Things like that would be pretty cool. Go ahead and check it out, and maybe it can be your future. Who knows? Anyways, let's jump into the Sase vs. Snute series. We're going to start with game number 2. At game number 2, is a couple things happen. First, we're going to talk about how Sase uses the Mothership Core to scout against Zerg. And then we're going to talk about the small pushes he can do utilizing his Mothership Core to make them much more effective. And then how to capitalize on an army advantage. Of course, the last game, the PvP, we talked about how to use an advantage of unit composition against your opponents and how to play to maximize that. This game we're talking about in a situation where you have an army advantage, how to capitalize on it, because everyone's seen those games that you're ahead of your opponent, and then half an hour later you lose. You're like, wait a minute, I could have done something else there perhaps. So we'll get into that a little bit. But let's jump into the game now and talk about using the Mothership Core to scout. So one thing that's cool is Sase, of course, has already done a Probe Scout, or actually he did a Zealot Scout this game because he opened with a fast Zealot. So he did a Zealot Scout. And then I see something. But all you Protoss guys out there, you scout with your Zealot, you see, okay, the Zerg is at the bottom right, he's playing the Zerg race. Then my Zealot dies or my Probe dies, I don't really know what else. Is he going to all-in me? Is he going to take a fast third? Any unit I send out from now on will just die to Zerglings, so this game's dumb, I can't scout. No. In Wings of Liberty, there's a lot of tricky scouting patterns you can do, and Heart of the Storm is even easier. Don't have to worry about being tricky. Just send that Mothership out, check if your opponent has a third. Okay, it doesn't have a third. Then what do? You send it in front of their natural, and you can see basically how many units they have. Their expansion and unit count. And now it's in front of his natural. If he's going to all-in you, in fact, I can see this poked a little bit more forward. You can even deny a creep tumor if it pops up. You can just go ahead and kill it off the bat. And you can see, is he sending units to me, right? My army's out here. I see a bunch of speedlings. What's here? More speedlings. Ah, he's coming after me, right? This Mothership Core is super, super effective at using that scouting. And now he knows, okay, get back in the base, boys. He was going to do a little push with the probe and some units. Now he knows get back in the base. Maybe even get a cannon, warp in some more units, stay in a defensive posture, where he can use those force fields to stay alive. This is a situation where if we look at this, the Mothership Core did not see those extra speedings crossing the map. This army, if he moved out, would kill him. He'd be dead, right? Boom. Game over. He lost his army. Even if he can defend with maybe a wall and cannons, he would still be in a situation where he's got no map control. His opponent can drone up like a madman. But now he knows that his opponent made all these units. Just got to sit back and defend, and he's going to be very far ahead because Snute cut so much economy early on to get this massive force out early. So if we jump into the game, we now know that he has an advantage because of that Mothership scouting utensil, basically. How powerful that was, and let him know to keep those sentries back where they're safe. And his opponent goes for timing right here. If he actually trapped all these Zerglings, that'd be awesome. Unfortunately, that force was just a tiny hex off. But of course, the only important thing here is to survive, because okay, I actually have more workers than my Zerg at 830 mark. I mean, and he's just started lair tech, or just finishing lair tech right now. All right, this gives Protoss a massive advantage because Protoss, of course, has already got an attack upgrade. He's got second level on the way, etc. Very, very good position. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is doing a small push with the Mothership Core. So your opponent's going to be wanting to go for infestors. He's going to drone up this third base, maybe even take a fourth base, etc. Right? Because right now, of course, if we look at the drone count, it's even, which Zerg doesn't want to be on unless they have tech, right? So he needs to get more drones and more tech, and you want to stop that, right? We see Terrans move all the time with Banshee harass, Dropship harass. Protoss doesn't have so much of those utensils. I mean, you can't go near units, But if you're going ground, right? In the Wings of Liberty, if you try to move out with a force like this, you can't do it because you get overwhelmed and killed, right? But in Heart of the Swarm, using a Mothership Core, you can feel free, even while you're still building more production buildings, you're still trying to get your tech up. You can do a small push out. And a whole small push out, you can force units without making a major commitment to an all-in, because the whole goal here is I want to make sure he stays on low tech. I want to make sure that he doesn't drone too aggressively. And then when I force all the units that he makes, all of a sudden what I can do is I can just focus on this hatchery, try to get this kill. Or I can just, kill the units, whichever one I do. Focus on this hatchery. And then even though I'm in danger of losing my units, because if you look at the army size, my opponent's significantly ahead of me because I forced all these units, I just recall out, right? And now all of a sudden, I didn't lose my whole army doing that. And I could do this small push out while teching behind it, while getting blink, while getting +2, right? You can do a small attack without committing to an all-in. Very, very powerful tool to use. Sase uses it brilliantly because now his opponent is stuck on all these roaches and zerglings. He's stuck on basically an equivalent economy, 2 base to 2 base, both with basically 2 saturated bases. And he's stuck with not a spear economy, and he's stuck on low tech units, right? And as long as he's stuck on roaches and zerglings, I have +2 in blink, and as long as they don't screw up my force fields too badly, I'll be in a very, very strong position. If you look at it now, Snute's trying to catch back up in economy. He's trying to, catch up in tech in the infestation pit, double expanding. While he's doing all this catch up, right, because he's behind, this is Sase's chance to utilize this army advantage, right? Sase's got this army advantage. Look at the army size here. He's got a significant army advantage. You add those 2 numbers up, it's all Sase, right? He's got 500 more minerals, 1,400 more in gas, a massive army advantage. But if you sat around with the army advantage and did nothing, right, what would happen over time? The Zerg player right now has only 7 more workers than his opponent, but he's double expanding, so he's going to get more economy. The Zerg player right now has only roaches and zerglings, but he's building the infestation pit. In fact, he might be... Alright, infestation pit is almost done, right? So he's going to catch up in tech, because in faster tech is roughly equivalent to like blink and +2, I would say, as far as the point in the game which you can get. So Zerg player right now is behind in everything. But because he's making all these investments, given time, very soon he'll catch up in economy and tech. And then a little bit after that, he'll be able to catch up in army using that economy and tech to catapult an army size. So if you have an army advantage that's very large, but your opponent will surpass you in economy and tech, what you want to do is force a decisive engagement as soon as possible before they can do so. Because once they surpass you in economy and tech, it's all a downward slope as they're going to catch up to you in army size as well, given a little bit of time. So if you're ahead in army size, you've got to force that decisive engagement. So that's exactly what Sase is doing. Moving out here, aggressively, trying to force a decisive engagement before the Zerg can catch up in upgrades, before the Zerg can utilize any economy gained from these extra bases, and before the Zerg can utilize their infestor tech, which they're investing in. This is a situation that's basically Zerg's pretty much dead here, and the game's going to be over. But one thing I want to talk about is the beautiful positions Snute's doing, right? So if you look at this, I mean, Snute's so far behind, he's in gigantic amounts of trouble, right? But, the two-way flank here is just... It's just beautiful, right? It's just any way Zerg can get back in a game, it's by stuff like this. I mean, Snute, we saw it even today when Nurture vs. Baby Knight, the game he won. If you set up really good positions as Zerg, you can make miracles happen. So, if you're a Zerg player out there, play like Snute. Well, don't play the beginning like Snute. Don't fall behind almost hopelessly. But even if you're ahead, medium, or behind, engagement, setting up good flanks is essential to winning a Zerg. Unfortunately, in this situation, as we can see it play out here, the Protoss is just too far ahead, right? If we go to the Army Value tab, the Protoss is ahead by like... He's got like 2,000... He's basically 50% bigger than his Zerg in Army supply. And that type of difference is it's too much for the Zerg to compete with. Yeah, the food looks even, but the food looks even, and you're talking about units that cost 100 resources for 2 food versus ones that cost 175 resources for 2 food. So the army value is massively in Protoss' favor, even though Snute is setting up the fights beautifully. Because of proper usage of Mothership scouting to make sure that Snute's semi-all-in attack early failed, combined with great usage of that Mothership recall later in the game. And of course, combined with knowing when to hit the timed attack right before Snute can really get that tech advantage and economic advantage and surpass his army. Those have all led Sase to just a beautiful game. And even though Snute again has just a nice concave here, the army value, we can see it again, is just too much different for Snute to really compete with. So he comes in here for the battle. Beautiful setup again from Snute, but too much Protoss, all from solid game strategy concepts. So even if you get stuck in bad positions like this, it's okay, because his goal here is to force a decisive engagement, right? He didn't mind that it wasn't in an ideal spot, because he just had to force a decisive engagement now, because that's when he had the army advantage. So if you have an army advantage, go and get the decisive engagement, because even if it's not the best position, you're going to go ahead and win the game. Now, if you want to avoid a battle, or if you're on the defensive, it's a saying in war where one force you can either decide when or where to fight. If you're deciding both, your opponent screwed up, right? So this is, both these players are really high level. Sase saying, let's fight now. Snute saying, if you want to fight now, you'll fight here, or I can get a good setup. So if you're a defending player and your opponent's attacking you, make sure to do what Snute did and always set up a great position that your opponent has to go into in order to attack. And if you're not as far behind as Snute was in this game, you're probably going to win the game. To summarize this game real quick, because I kind of rambled there a bit. Remember, use the Mothership to scout early, use it to do small pushes to force units, and then if you do those two things correctly, you'll often get a very big army advantage, which you can then use to end the game decisively before your opponent can catch up. That wraps up game number 2 between Sase and Snute. We'll take a short break and we'll be talking about game number 3.